The footage is more than 70 years old and the quality grainy, but the scene is incredibly significant in the history of our monarchy, for this is the first moment Princess Elizabeth met her future husband, when King George Virgin Islands U.S. visited Dartmouth College in 1939. A promising cadet called Philip was assigned to entertain his daughters. He obviously made a lasting impression on the 13-year-old Elizabeth. Our extraordinary photograph, discovered in archives, shows the first meeting between the future monarch and her husband-to-be, over a game of croquet. The picture was unearthed while researching Prince Philip at 90, a documentary to mark his milestone birthday in June, and it was not the only striking scene. Another image of a swastika being hoisted up the school flagpole is clear enough, as is the sight of a 13-year-old boy with a shock of blonde hair marching in line with his classmates, alone among the pupils at Salem School, in southern Germany. The blonde-haired boy is larking about and playing up to the camera. If the growing power of the Nazi Party, evident in the shot of a swastika and of uniformed men giving Nazi salutes, had convinced his fellows of the wisdom of respect and deference, it does not seem to have impressed this defiant teenager. Indeed, he lasted at the school for just over a year, as the Jewish educationalist Kurt Hahn, the school's co-founder, later wrote. He was removed from Salem rather abruptly. Whenever the Nazi salute was given, he roared with laughter. After he had been admonished to caution, he continued to be doubled up in uncontrollable mirth. Even as far back as 1934, it seems, His Royal Highness, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was already a fully paid-up member of the Awkward Squad. The project all started in 2009 when I was asked to produce and direct a film for ITV about the Royal Windsor Horse Show, presented then, as now, by Alan Titchmarsh. We interviewed Prince Philip about his involvement in carriage driving, a sport for which he wrote the rules. Following the success of that project, All the Queen's Horses, and then Prince William's Africa, a film I made about the Duke of Cambridge's trip to Africa last summer, I was entrusted with the task of making this documentary. With production company Spun Gold TV and Alan, we were allowed to film the Duke over 8 months as he went about his official duties, and we trailed him everywhere. From bicycle factories to building sites, we filmed him during state visits at Windsor Castle and at home at Sandringham while out for his morning carriage drive. The Duke also granted us an unprecedented 75-minute interview at Windsor Castle. While our questions to him had to be submitted in advance, he didn't balk when we went off piste and into the area of his family life. Public opinion about Prince Philip is often as emphatic as the man himself. We all think we know him, gruff, allegedly flirtatious and famous for his straight-talking and so-called gaffes. His manner can undoubtedly be abrupt and, according to those who know him well, he doesn't suffer fools gladly. If ever there was a born leader, an alpha male, it is surely Prince Philip, and yet he has spent the past 60 years in a supporting role, walking 3 steps behind the Queen. He is the longest-serving consort in British history. There is a seeming contradiction here, but in making this film and in talking to those who surround the Duke on a daily basis, I feel that I have begun at the very least to get some measure of the man. In August 2010 we filmed the Duke with members of the Design Council at Buckingham Palace. They were about to begin judging the entries for their coveted annual design award. He's not interested in himself. His motto is, "Just get on with it." Prince Philip fixed me with his bright, unflinching blue eyes and said firmly, "I think we will conclude filming now." I opened my mouth to argue that we'd barely begun, and then I shut it again. The Duke is not a man accustomed to contradiction. I nodded meekly and signaled to my crew to withdraw. Our interview took place on February 21 this year in the imposing grandeur of the White Drawing Room at Windsor Castle. The Duke entered briskly and purposefully. He is irritated by inexactitude and inaccuracy. This can make him intimidating, and when we were out and about with him he barely acknowledged our presence. It is unusual to find oneself so thoroughly invisible since, as a filmmaker, I am used to forging a close bond with the subject of the documentary. I did finally talk to him, having been formally introduced for the first time. I said, "We're the people who've been following you around for the past few months." "Yes," he replied. "Although, I can't think why on earth you'd want to do that." He is genuinely baffled by people's fascination with him. Lady Myra Butter, his lifelong friend and cousin, told us, "I don't think he's interested in himself. Actually, I don't think he thinks anybody else is interested in him. You know, he just gets on with it. That's his motto, just get on with it." I think our generation rather were brought up to say it and do it. I mean, sometimes, what are the alternatives? Prince Philip's early years were full of drama and displacement. Born on June 10, 1921, in Corfu, his father was Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, his mother Princess Alice, the youngest of 5 and the only son. Prince Philip was just 18 months old when he was loaded in an orange crate into a boat sent by the British government after a revolutionary court forced his father and his family to flee Greece for a life of exile in France. By 1933, he no longer had a family home. His mother, suffering from a breakdown, was being treated in a Swiss sanatorium. His father had moved to the south of France where he lived for the rest of his life with his mistress, and his 4 sisters had married German princes, leaving Philip largely to the care of his British royal relatives. Yet Prince Philip barely acknowledges the vagaries of his early life. "I didn't notice it at the time," he told Alan. "It seemed to be perfectly normal as far as I was concerned. I mean, how could I compare it with anything else?" At the age of 13, his sister Theodora enrolled him at Salem Castle School near her home in Germany, a school established by her German father-in-law with Kurt Hahn. "After I'd been at Salem for about a year the Nazis had more or less taken over and life was getting a bit tricky," Prince Philip remarked, with typical understatement. He was sent to Britain to attend Gordonstoun School, newly founded by Hahn who had fled imminent Nazi arrest in 1934. After Gordonstoun, the prince enrolled at Dartmouth Naval College, and so it was that, when King George Virgin Islands U.S. visited the college in 1939, a promising cadet called Philip was assigned to entertain his daughters. He obviously made a lasting impression on the 13-year-old Elizabeth. Our extraordinary photograph, discovered in the college archive, shows the first meeting between the future monarch and her husband-to-be, over a game of croquet. The following year, the prince was sent to war. "You were thrust into combat at a very early age," began Alan. "Well, so were lots of other people of my generation," the Duke interrupted, betraying just a hint of impatience. "Did he enjoy his time in the Navy?" "You're obsessed about enjoying, aren't you?" said the Duke. "Well, I lived through it. I mean I just accepted it. I mean it wasn't miserable." "Oh yes, I suppose, yes." He escorted convoys down the east coast of Britain from the Firth of Forth to Sheerness, through U-boat Alley. He also saw action in the Mediterranean. He was mentioned in dispatches for his involvement in the Battle of Cape Matapan, off the coast of Greece, a fierce night engagement between the British and Italian fleets, which the Duke referred to as a bit of activity. After the war, the untimely death of King George Virgin Islands U.S. precipitated the start of Prince Philip's life as the Queen's consort and forced him to relinquish his naval career. How difficult was this? Well, I mean how long is a piece of string? I don't know how difficult it was, he said. Well, it was naturally disappointing because I'd just been promoted to commander and in fact the most interesting part of a naval career was just starting, but then equally, if I stopped and thought about it, well, being married to the Queen, it seemed to me that my first duty was to serve her in the best way I could. Duty and service are two words that are very important to the Duke. He has led, with extraordinary energy and vigor, some 850 different organizations from regiments to charities. Perhaps most famously the World Wildlife Fund and the Duke of Edinburgh Awards Scheme, an enterprise that has impacted on the lives of millions of young people worldwide and for which Prince Philip refuses to take credit. He recalled, "Kurt Hahn sent for me. He said, 'My boy, I want you to start an awards scheme.' I said, 'Thanks very much.' When people ask him to do these things, if he thinks he can make a meaningful contribution he tends to say yes." The Princess Royal told us, "We were very much advised by the Duke to wait and choose something that you felt you were either sufficiently interested in or felt you could actually do something for, which is a very different sort of approach in terms of just being, you know, the name at the top of the paper." That was very valuable advice. I watched the Duke during a visit to the Brompton Bicycle Factory, the makers of the folding bicycle and the 2009 recipient of the Prince Philip Designer's Prize. As he closely questioned the workers on the shop floor, he was fascinated by the minutiae of the engineering and it gave me an insight into the way his mind works. He is intensely practical and pragmatic, able to turn his energies from the immense post-fire restoration of Windsor Castle to the detailed design of a picnic trailer. He told Alan, When I went to Balmoral all the picnics came out in baskets and it was a ghastly business trying to unpack and pack them. I thought, we can do better than that. Daniel Harvey has been responsible for every piece of machinery on the Sandringham estate for almost 20 years and Prince Philip is a frequent visitor to his workroom. Mr. Harvey showed us the Duke's picnic trailer, meticulously designed to be practical, efficient and not to rattle. There's always a bit of competition with the Duke of Edinburgh and myself as to who comes up with the best ideas, said Mr. Harvey with clear affection, and, like the paterfamilias of almost every family, Prince Philip is always in charge of the barbecue. He delights in people who are at the cutting edge of what they do. It comes as no surprise to learn that the venue for his staff's Christmas lunch in 2009 was Heston Blumenthal's restaurant The Fat Duck, where Prince Philip chose a menu of fish and chips and enthusiastically sprayed vinegar into the air from the small bottles placed on the table for that purpose, to recreate the ambience of a local tippy. This evident high-spiritedness is, according to those who know him, the cause of the gaffes for which he is renowned. He has said in the past that his aim as he walks down a line of people waiting to meet him is to make at least one of them laugh. Of course that's a risky way of approaching life, said the royal biographer Giles Brainrith. If you're the Queen you don't need to say anything and you don't get into trouble. If you're the Duke of Edinburgh you say a lot of things, sometimes too many, and you do get into trouble. Sometimes the banter misfires but usually actually it doesn't. The Duke inspires unswerving loyalty both in those who work for him and those who count him as a friend. Sir Brian McGrath, for many years as private secretary, jokes that he retired through the front door and immediately re-entered the palace through the French windows to take up a new post as extra equerry. Working for Prince Philip is great fun, he said. Dame Anne Griffiths, his librarian and archivist, has, astonishingly, been working for him since before the coronation. She has an infectious sense of humor that instantly endears her to you and makes you think well of her boss. If Prince Philip likes her, he must be alright. Philip, for all his advanced years, is disciplined and fit. He doesn't eat between meals and rarely accepts the refreshment routinely offered at as many engagements. No doubt the reason he declined the pint of Guinness that he gazed at with evident longing during the Queen's visit to Ireland. At the end of our interview, he showed us round part of Windsor Castle, striding down corridors, talking knowledgeably about the improvements he made after the fire. The castle will continue to stand long after its current occupants have shuffled off this mortal coil. A fact that makes one realize that the Queen and Prince Philip are the curators and custodians of something far greater than themselves. Mr. Brandreth believes, and I think I agree with him, that the key to understanding Prince Philip is an awareness of the generation he symbolizes. It was Napoleon who said if you want to understand a man, look at the world as it was when he was 20, said Brandreth. When the Queen and the Duke were in their early 20s, it's around 1940, their values are the values of Britain in 1940. All that is best of Britain in 1940 is exemplified by the Duke of Edinburgh in 2011, aged 90. He is the same man he was aged 20. He has skillfully steered a course through his life that has allowed him to devote it to our Queen while remaining resolutely his own man. Long may he continue to do so.